What's good, fellas? This is a tier list on a game I have enjoyed for about 3 to 4 years now. Beasts of Bermuda. This is a dinosaur survival game, a game where you're thrown into an unforgiving world as a baby dinosaur, pterosaur, or marine reptile. These will all be dinosaurs for the sake of this video. Actually, nerd, go away. With the goal of growing to reach adulthood, so you can enjoy the end game of your dinosaur, whether it be nesting to pass on your talent tree, to hunt other players, to travel the map to unlock biomes, or just trying to set a new personal record for your size. Also, a whole achievement system in the game now, so that's fun. I find this game a lot of fun, that I think has the best gameplay cycle of any current dinosaur survival game out there. But before we get started, I want to explain the talent tree and growth a little bit more. First, I think growth would be easier to tackle. Basically, there is no real growth cap that anyone should reasonably reach on the official servers. With this unending growth comes a huge counter, which is hunger. The bigger you grow, the hungrier you get, and it will eventually get to the point where you starve to death because it is near impossible to manage your food. I don't want differences in growth to impact the tier list because the bigger you get, of course, the more health, stats, the better your stats are, basically. And you grow over time. But I don't want differences in growth to impact this tier list because that would be unfair to some playables. I want, basically, most of the thing I'm comparing is between 1.2s. Anyways, that's about it there is to say. Let's move to the talent tree. In Beasts of Bermuda, there is a talent tree for every dino that stays fairly the same but can differ from playable to playable. Given every dino has at least 3 different main builds they can go with varying degrees of success, those being speed combat, combat survival, or speed survival. And the different trees are, of course, speed, combat, and survival. Speed and combat are pretty self-explanatory, but survival has a mix of talents that actually help survival, and ones that increase your health, your healing, your armor, etc. I will be factoring the most common build I see into the ranking rather than all of them. For example, a combat survival Megaraptor doesn't happen very often, neither does a speed survival Psy, but a speed combat Megaraptor does, and so does a speed combat Psy. Speed combat is basically the great common factor of everything, I'm gonna be real. I also just uploaded an unscripted one earlier this week, and I've read some critiques, so I've decided to script it up and fix everything I could have misstated, as well as add anything I feel I missed. I will link the old video in the description of this one, so you guys can see my unscripted thoughts on everything. But I just wanted to be more formal in the way I help people understand my thoughts and better. Because let's be real, a sleep-deprived rant is not the best way to go about it. Also, a couple things I would like to clarify: all dinos can be good if used by good players, and the difference between tiers isn't too great. Like, an A tier dino is not 100 leagues better than a B tier dino. It's just slightly better. And in my opinion, typically better, these are some biases that could affect it. Personally, I think better dinos have better ability to pick fights and secure kills more often. I don't like the idea of requiring a group to survive, so that will affect my ranking, definitely. And I'm not too happy with terrain-tied dinosaurs. Also, sorry if some of the clips are lower quality, as I have to screen grab some of my older videos for clips that I don't immediately have stored because my storage isn't great. And I kind of just have to work with what I got. So some of my sources might just be trust me bro. And I come from a mainly solo point of view on Official 2 and Survival Free Roam servers. Actual survival, not auto-res. One last thing, desync is basically being hit. I will say desync a lot, probably. Desync is being hit somewhere where you shouldn't have been hit. So for the sake of this tier list, I will be pretending it doesn't exist. I'll put up an example right now of just sometime I got desynced. So yeah, let's just get into it. First off, I'm starting with Coelaceratops. Coela is strong. I will not deny its pure strength. It has a strong stomp, a strong horn thrust attack, a buff that reduces damage taken for a short period of time when bit on the head, as well as just the generic damage reduction on the head. It also has a turn in place. With all that said, it still isn't that great. I can't help but see that Koa suffers immensely from anything that can jump or anything that can get around it. Of course, Koa deals completely fine with any 1v1 with carnivore apexes because it can just face tank and stomp. But as soon as multiple are involved, the Koa usually has a way higher chance of dying because it can't defend itself from the back when trying to deal with one of its attackers. typically requiring to corner itself as to not be killed. See, if you have 2 Rexes and 1 Koa, if the Rex sends it at the Koa, the other Rex can just get behind it and kill it. Which, the Koa could get the Rex, one of the Rexes killed, but then the Koa is probably going to be dead. Even in equal-sized groups, where you have 3 Acros and 3 Koas, the Acros will usually have the Koas pinned, just because if the Koas run out, the one in the back will typically be punished with damage, and possible separation depending on who the Koas are. So you can just have 1 Koa by itself and the other 2 are off. All of this is amplified with mid-tiers like Megar, Wii, and Paki that are able to jump over Koa, completely avoiding the turn in place, because as you can just jump over, bite, and run away. This leaves Koa needing to be either hidden in shelter to fight or up against a cliff. You wonder why the Restless debuff is Koa. However, being up against a cliff makes you unable to finish kills most of the time because you will be punished with around 200 damage, around 200 HP gone from its group members, keeping you pinned and attacking you when you go out to finish a kill. And when you have only 1.6k HP at 1.2 and a pretty mediocre heal, it's not worth the risk. You just kind of have to take it until they get bored, or you have to choose your kills very wisely, as in going out and finishing a kill very wisely. I mean, it's pretty whatever. With all that said, it's not impossible to win these fights, as ambush hunting is a viable option. Typically any vigilant player will spot you before you're able to kill them though. And personally, I think if you need to be on good terrain to win a fight, we will get to Paki when we get there, chill out, it makes the playable instantly worse, an instantly worse choice. I would also like to mention Koa is an omnivore, so you can survive off of AI and plants in an obscure section of the map to grow to get big and then go out and fight stuff, but where's the fun in that? All of this leads me to place Koa in the bottom of D tier, the least good of the players. Also, one last thing I need to mention. They gave Koa the damage reduction bite on the head, which really only helped it against the only thing it was good at killing, apexes. Because if you bite its head, the only thing that's not going to be able to get away from biting its head is Rex, because it might be out of stam, or a Kark, which it can still deal with those pretty effectively for the most part. So I'm not sure why they gave it that, because any mid-tier player is going to know not to bite a Koa on the face because they will get stabbed. Our next playable isn't one you'll find on land, if you even run into one of these players. It is an ocean dweller, Chronosaurus. Chrono, in my opinion, is extremely fun and probably my favorite aquatic to play. Its playstyle consists of ambushing from the seafloor to insta-cripple anything swimming above. It has the strongest base damage and injury of any marine playable, and can compete with most land animals in raw damage. It has an ability you can spec into at the top of the speed tree called Elusive, allowing it to become near invisible, cloaking itself in its surrounding, making it even harder to spot before it's too late. However, Chrono is built for a simpler time when there weren't as many sweaty aquatics and cave camping was viable. In the current ocean ecosystem, creatures with Dart excel way further than ones without. Dart is an attack that propels you quickly forward for pretty standard damage. Dart might not look or sound like much, but note that without throwing 9 points into survival for the talent Hard-Headed, any attack can cancel the Chrono's lunge, which can be a Dart. Meaning the Chrono pretty much has to stick to biting to win, when the Moza or Ichthy you're fighting can get behind you in about a second and dart you in the next. It usually results in a slow, grueling death. This also puts it in the same situation as Koa, if the Koa doesn't get the ambush, having to pin itself to a rock so its body hitbox doesn't get exploited. Now, I don't think it suffers as much as Koa, because your injury can get you to secure a kill easier with more haphazard players, and pulling off ambushes is way more effective with Chrono, just because of the lunge by insta-crippling opponents, allowing quick, efficient kills. However, there's one thing I haven't mentioned yet, Archelon. The bane of all Chrono players is Archelon. It has a slightly weaker lunge ability, but swims noticeably faster. By weaker, I mean it doesn't go as far, because it doesn't do damage. Archelon also boasts the ability to insta-cripple its enemies. I will talk about this more when we get to Archelon, but Chrono basically has nothing to win this fight effectively and consistently, or even run. I find Chrono lacking its ability to keep up with the rest of the aquatic playables, and for that, Chrono will find itself in DT with Koa. This hurts, as I really enjoy playing Chrono. I probably made Archelon sound way overpowered earlier, but may I inform you, it really isn't. First, allow me to list all of Archelon's abilities. It has a shield mechanic, which stores an extra HP pool that heavily reduces all damage and injury taken until it's depleted. A reflect akin to size that drains AP and boosts your own when hit. A wing beat with good knockback. A charge bite that can do about 1000 damage and 200 injury. And Chrono's lunge but with no damage. With all of this, you might be wondering, how is this bad? Well, it's the lunge. As I explained earlier, Dart is a way better than Lunge because it does damage by flying through the enemy at very fast speeds. It's also easy to get behind in Tailroid turtles because Tailride turtles because honestly, it's not very nimble without insane inherits. And against Moza and Elasmo, it can escape onto land, but if the Moza or Elasmo, that's if the Moza or Elasmo allows it to lunge onto land, because quite frankly, it's just faster on land than the Moza and Elasmo. But Paleophis, Ichthyovenador, and Lurdusaurus aren't bound to the realm of water as they can go chase it onto land and finish them off. It's not too hard to tail ride them on land unless they're like God Inherit with 5 Nimble and 5 Bite and 5 everything else. So I'm not going to expand too much on that. And if we go back into the water, the cooldown between the end of the bite animation and charging up one is large, and it allows a good free hit in between if you're just going to dart through its face, but you can also just get around it and dart it pretty easily too. Also, the bite drains AP when held, so just your AP is always depleting. And now, of course, Archelon can be good. It's not that hard to grow if you play smart, given you just eat fish and seaweed. Also, just avoiding conflict and being more elusive also helps you grow. Also, being in a group also allows good, and once you get bigger, it's near impossible to die just because you're HP and injury, but that's the same for most everything. But I just find Archelon so stranded in situations. A good player can solo a group of 3 or more Archelons, at least securing a kill on one and coming back for it. And by a good player, I mean like a good semi or Moza even. I will say I've killed way more Archelons than I've died to, and I've only really died to the ones that are just massive and double or triple my growth in a 1v1. Also, Paleo can't take injury in the ocean, and it can dart, so it does Venom too. With this, it leads me to place Archelon just above Chrono at the top of D tier. Now we are moving out of D tier and what I consider the decent dinos, nothing that would make them terribly good or terribly bad. Oryctodromeus is my first of these. Oryctodromeus is a goofy little guy that digs holes in the earth and throws sands at enemies. When you sand something, it limits the mobility of the creature you sand, making their sprint and walk slower, and making them unable to jump. Also making birds unable to fly, so I just like to throw that in there. They're pretty cool. The burrow system allows them to create farms of food and water and able to survive with going to the surface as little as possible. This works on paper, but in current Gauntlet, smaller dinos starve much faster than big ones. And given Ori is the smallest thing in the game, it gets hungry very fast. This also just leaves them for making crystal and cucumber farms for feeding mix packers. Its kit is very interesting, but I don't see it being very applicable in the current game. It's just more like a herbivore velo that doesn't have as great of a jump or speed. It has the potential to kill large carnies, but because of its small hitbox, it is more vulnerable to other things though. It can be caught just by about every mid in the game if they have the want to kill them, and is outcompeted by Paleo and Velo. I do find the playstyle fun on a free roam server, but those don't really exist right now. Yeah, so there isn't a lot to say other than it's a mainly little spectator dino. It can group with Psy, but it can also just dig a burrow from protection if it doesn't want to be killed. Maybe they could add a food and burrow that gives it food but can't be picked up and can only spawn in small spaces, so you can't fit other dinos in there to give them food. But as of right now, I find Ori quite lacking, and I'm going to put it at the bottom of C tier. Our next is Weehan Venator, or Megalosaurus. It's basically the definition of generic. There isn't a lot to say about him. It's the definition of a generic theropod. It's relatively fast, it has an okay jump. It's not as good as it was in the past, as in the jump, but you can still kind of use it in combination with terrain to get above and over enemies. It has an attack called Tendon Tear that allows it to slow down enemies for a short period of time, but I find it more annoying than helpful, given it activates when you spam attack, nearly instantly draining your ability power. In the current meta where everything has a specialized niche, I just find Weehan very generic. Everything about it is just okay. It's the definition of mid. It gets caught by Megaraptor, Parrot, and ambushing Rex, so it leaves it vulnerable to those. And I find it quite similar to Allosaurus from Legacy Isle, just being generic in everything, but being able to be killed by most things quite easily if you don't know what you're doing. But being able to survive relatively okay if you do. I think it just fits in C tier, because it's just, there's nothing really making it special. Its other ability is identification. It allows you to see the stats of other dinosaurs, but you have to put in points to make that useful. To see growth, you have to put in 3 points, which isn't even that useful. I'm gonna be honest. It's really only good for seeing food and health, but you can see health without even putting points in. So, like, yeah. And the stat difference between growth isn't even too great anymore, so what's even the matter? But I just find Weehan lacking. Its jump doesn't allow it to kill larger apexes as much as it used to. I mean, it still can. It can just tail ride them on the ground, but it used to be able to jump over them and just get in bites like that and tail ride like that, but it can't really do that anymore. Also, Para is faster, so it can just run down Wii and kill it quite easily, because there's not much a Wii can do to a Para. I'm gonna be completely honest. And I think that just makes it fit in C tier. It's nothing good, it's nothing bad, it's just okay. For our next playable, we are sent back to the ocean with Elasmosaurus. Elasmo is squishy. It's the weakest of the ocean, but by no means is it the worst. It's the fastest thing in the ocean, with a relatively weak damage, but it does do bleed damage. Bleed is a mechanic that stunts HP and comfort healing. Koa also has bleed. I don't know if I mentioned that at the time, but it also does pretty good bleed. But it basically stunts HP and comfort healing, which is very strong with how fast things heal in this game. At least most things heal. However, in the ocean, bleed isn't really too great, because anything you deal bleed to, with the little bleed damage you do, you can't really go off and heal and come back, because everything travels at light speed in the ocean, and everything gets it from sleeping instantly. So you can instantly sleep, get a heal tick, and go back. So just moving to stay alert. It was kind of just given to Elasmo as a buffer at the time, because it was really underwhelming, but it still kind of is. Back to Elasmo itself. One thing you might notice is its absurdly long neck. Its neck has an auto aim, which triggers when you dart by something while holding your ability key. I'm surprised that a lot of people don't know that this exists, but it allows you to stay out of the enemy's range while dealing damage to it. Like, if you're holding dart and your ability key at the same time, it'll auto aim to the nearest thing near you. Which, I'm gonna be real, I didn't learn that until like 1,000 hours into the game, so like, yeah. Because I would just dart, bite, dart, which is way expensive in AP. But with that said, Elasmo's dart is really expensive compared to other things, and it can be hard to sustain fights for long without a group of 3 or more. And it typically just gets destroyed by semis because it's not as strong. I mean, you can still fight semis, but I usually see semis winning. I do find Elasmo fun, but there isn't much incentive to play it when you can go as Paleo, Ichthy, or Lurd, and interact with land and water with about the same kit. It can function as a scavenger, but so can Ichthy and Paleo. But not many people want to scavenge anyways when Malawani exists, because Mala is just the ocean scavenger. By the way, if I were to place Mal, it'd be in C or D tier, but I'm not going in depth about that, so don't expect that. I'm not doing any of the AI like that. But this leads me to place Elasmo in C tier. It can be good, but it's kind of hard to actually get effective kills if you're by yourself. Our next is one you would think to be higher, but within the current game is just kind of okay. And that is Apatosaurus. Apato is by far the strongest playable in the game. It is the definition of a huge, lumbering beast that looks like it shouldn't be killed or messed with by anything. And that is true in some regards. Apato's tail whip can do up to 450 damage with Brawler at 1.2. And has nearly 7,000 health without Con. not to mention its stomp that could instantly cripple anyone who isn't too cautious. However, Appa is just way too slow. Its speed, it makes sense that a huge lumbering beast would be slow, but the tail whip cooldown, backup speed, and stomp speed allows anyone who isn't great at timing needed to be up against a cliff. Now, its HP is the highest in the game, and its tail covers most of its body, but if exposed, its front side can be easily exploited. If you are able to avoid stomps, which I'm going to be real, in the current game isn't that hard, you can weave through them, get good damage in, and go off and heal if you get hit, and repeat the cycle. This is another dinosaur that was built for a pastime, literally. I'm pretty sure Pred said, the lead developer, said they just took its stats from the old game, which in the old game, not as many things would try to take on an Appa because everything was just genuinely slower. But it's different now. And Megaraptor didn't exist. Anyways, back to what I was saying. You can get good damage in. If you get hit, go heal and repeat the cycle. This is a very good strat to use with bleeders like Acro, and especially Kark, because of Kark's roar ability. Also, mid-tiers are unrelenting, and will attack to 1 HP and then go off and heal and come back. And multiply that by groups of 7 or more for mid-tiers. This leaves Appa pinned more than not, similar to Koa. And one thing I didn't mention was Appa's ability to group with Para, which helps it a lot and definitely ups its survivability, but most Para players extremely underestimate their own power and don't really do much in a combat situation. So it's not the most reliable. Also, Psy exists, and I'm not a great fan of needing to rely on other things to survive anyways. With all that said, I think this guy gets the highest placement in C tier. It's the best of the mediocre dinosaurs. We are now moving on to the dinos that have something that make them good but still have a glaring weakness or two. Pachycephalosaurus is the crash out of Beast of Bermuda. I mean, who needs to be cautious of their life when you can charge at the speed of sound headfirst into anything you see, instantly crippling them and introducing them to gravity millions of years before Isaac Newton? Pachy boasts an attack that allows it to accelerate into the fastest land animal straight into enemy lines. Its charge does about 160 to 200 health. I'm pretty sure that's a full charge. The full charge, I think it's 3 times multiplier your base damage. I'm pretty sure that's how that works, if they didn't change it. It can also just be used to add extra damage to an attack by comboing it with a start charge and headbutt, so you can just start charge headbutt something for extra damage. Its charge also allows it to run away from most things given its speed. Now, you can assume with the charge doing a lot of knockback and injury, it's very good for any land on a hill. Pachy excels greatly on any land that is sloped at all. A lot of people really undermine how many hills really are on Titania because you can deal pretty decent fall damage to most things in most places, outside of like a Megaraptor, just because a Megaraptor is just good at jumping. And I can see the salt marsh being bad, but who's playing Pachy in a biome where you'll be swimming half the time anyways? It's also an omnivore, making it easier than most to feed. If you couldn't tell earlier with Koa, I'm not a big fan on terrain-tied playables, so why isn't Pachy lower? Well, Pachy has a few extra important options on flatland. First, it can run away from everything. Koa can't run away from everything, if it has to usually deal with its aggressors. Second is, terror riding is surprisingly easy with Pachy. And the third is just its jump. It has a great jump, which allows it to fight most things. The jumping in this game is literally what determines fights, I swear to God. Anyways, all of these allow Pachy to choose its fight and be able to actually win fights punching up weight classes against like Weehan or even Rex and Cart and Acro. The jump alone lets Pachy to bait charge an enemy, jump over and attack their legs and run, which is surprisingly effective. The only reason Pachy isn't higher is because of 2 things: birds and god-awful stam regen. First, birds just will easy solo Pachy most of the time, just because there's nothing Pachy can really do because of its lower HP levels and it not doing a ton of damage on it's just raw bite damage, and it's kind of hard to charge something that's flying above you and behind you. The other thing is pretty self-explanatory. its stamina gain is so slow, at least compared to other things in the game. Not compared to anything in the Isle, though. And Exhausting Bite just destroys little bro. It just eats his stam, and there's not much he can do. Also Tendon Tear. But with all that being said, I think Packy finds its spot as the first dinosaur in B tier. Our next spot is also a small little guy. It's Velociraptor. Velo is great for pulling off Monster Hunter endgame kills, but not the greatest at dealing with anything else. It's a small carnivore with a weak bite and powerful jump. He's basically Utah from any legacy players out there, but weaker. Velo is great at dealing with Rex, Kark, and Acro, and most other big things, but struggles immensely with Paleotrope, Megar, and smaller dinos that it can just be hit by. There isn't a whole lot to say about this guy. Velo is a great scavenger, being pretty good at just going from one gore to the next gore, or just surviving off of AI, and then soloing the typical Rex or Acro main wandering about, assuming desync isn't evolved. I would like to stress though, as good as Velo is against big threats, the only thing it can do against smaller things is run. It can usually get away from everything by climbing a tree or something, just jumping away. But Paleophis makes this strategy obsolete. You can typically run away if you see them first by just run jumping, but if you're caught off guard, you're more than likely instantly cooked. Just because of Paleo's spit range, and it's basically just curtains. Also, Tropiognathus's wing beat has a tracker for some reason, so you're most likely not escaping a trope if it wing beats you. For those two reasons alone, I don't feel like it can be placed any higher than B tier with Pachycephalosaurus. In contrast to the smallest carnivore in the game, we are now moving up to the largest, Tyrannosaurus. Tyrannosaurus is the strongest carnivore in the game. I'm pretty sure it boasts the most HP among land carnivores. It could be close with Karkar, but I'm pretty sure Tyrannosaurus has more HP. I could be wrong. It's good for blitzkrieg ambushing an unsuspecting player, as it's the fastest apex in the sprint, but it doesn't have that good of a stamina pool, meaning you have to pull off your kills pretty smart, so you just have to be good at managing your, 4 stamina. People used to use this thing as more of a strong brawler, which honestly is quite sad, because if you go back, I'm just kind of reminiscing, but if you go back 2, 3, even 4 years, definitely 4 years, there was no such thing as a Speed Rex. Speed Rex was just not an idea. Everybody would go Combat Survival Rex, which just, I don't understand. But now it's more popular to be a strong ambusher, as it can insta-cripple anything that isn't paying attention. Even though it is the strongest carny in the game, it doesn't really fare that well against any of the herbivore apexes, as they don't really take injury. At least Oppo, Bronto, and Sai don't take injury, and Koa can just face tank in a 1v1. And if you make one mistake while fighting a Sai, you're cooked. You can still kill Sais, it's just if you bite that reflect, the Sai's getting faster. If you get hit in your leg once, you're cooked. Does anybody remember leg hits? Anyways, this leaves Tyrannosaurus as more of a hunter of carnivores in mid tiers, like Para, Weehead, and Lurd. I also find Rex very weak to Velos and Oris just because there isn't much a Rex can do. I would say it does have the same problem with Wheeze and Megars, but typically Rex's turn and injury just discourages Wheeze and Megars from attacking, and it's not too hard to clip bite them given their bigger hitbox. But with Velos can just jump tail ride, and that makes them completely immune to any form of being hit. And the only way the Rex can really do anything is go into water or pray to the desync gods, and depending on the player, the Velo can just keep chasing. Mid-tiers are able to do about the same thing, but not as successfully, as Rex can still pretty good get them off its tail and usually kill them. But this makes me want to put Rex in B tier. A controversial take being Carcharodontosaurus. Karkar has the same problems as Rex, but to a greater degree. Karkar is similar to Rex in the way of being a strong, tanky apex, but instead of a fast, crippling apex, it's a bleeder that has an ability that allows it to heal after attacking something. Its ability, called, this is just a note I want to say Devious Roar. I couldn't get the name. It's Voracious Roar. and I couldn't remember it, but it is Voracious Roar. It basically gives you stacks of healing over time that bypasses bleed, so you can, but does not heal bleed or injury. So you can heal your HP while you have bleed, which is just kind of insane. So like fighting Koa or Acro is just easier, but you can just get tail raided by both of them. It can give like 200 HP every couple of seconds with points invested. I'm not completely sure on the exact heal, but because it hasn't been in the game that long and haven't played it that much. But this basically allows it to face tank anything, even Koa in some instances, but Stomp, Knockback, and the head damage reduction should let Koa deal with it fine. This makes it good at tackling Appa's, Sai's, and even sometimes Koa's and Rex's. However, with these strengths come weaknesses, the weaknesses being turn radius. Kark's turn radius allows it to be tail rode by just about everything, even Rex's and Acros. If the Kark doesn't have any group mates, it has to give an offering to the decent gods and able to call upon their power, because there is nothing a Kark can reliably do when any mid-tier, including Acro, is on its tail. There's just nothing the Kark can do. Karkar is very strong, but I feel like its weakness to something most of the roster can effectively do prevents it from being any higher than B tier. I also understand groups could negate this, but it's still possible, and again, being reliant on a group isn't the greatest thing for a playable, because you can be put with really bad players that just won't get the dinosaur off your tail, or really good players that just will... Do good Kark players exist, actually? I don't know. I just find it so, the tail of Kark so exploitable. It's good, Kark is good for hunting Sai, Koa, sometimes Koa, depending on... I say Koa is a 50-50. Sai, Appa, and sometimes Bronto. Bronto can get out some pretty good DPS though if it's good. But that's about it. It's good for fighting what Rex isn't, and it has about the same build as Rex, but with a heal call, I'd say. And it's slower. It's also the slowest carnivore in the game, so just let that sink in. It can be run down by most everything. So I just find it kind of lacking. I just feel like it's missing something that keeps it from being any better than B tier. We are done with the dinosaurs that have a glaring weakness, and we're now onto the dinosaurs that are pretty solid and what I consider to be hard to die unless you do something dumb or aren't very good at the game yet. The first of them being Pteranodon, the first resident of A tier. Pteranodon is a flyer that relies on skydiving through enemies, doing pretty standard damage. Pteranodon, like Packy, has a mechanic that allows it to do more damage the faster it's going. However, Pteranodon only does like 200 damage a full dive, so it's pretty weak, but for having a very little HP and the ability to avoid all land threats, it's kind of a balance thing. Anyway, Pteranodon is good for killing Megars, Wees, because of its full dives and tiny hitbox. Its tiny hitbox also makes it pretty good for killing tropes. If you're good at keeping your momentum, staying above your enemy, and if you know hitboxes, you can usually take down any trope user. As me personally has taken down trips double to triple my size, so in survival, so yeah. If you can't kill them, you can also just run. You can typically get away as you are more nimble, but sometimes they will be persistent enough to catch you. I find it typically whoever sees the other player first usually has the win. If the trope is attacking the PT, the trope's usually going to be able to land a pretty good hit and cripple the PT. But if the PT is attacking the trope will not be expecting it, and you've already got to dive through it, so you've got good momentum to continue the fight. Oh my god, my water, oh my god. But anyways, back to the script. You can get away from tropes sometimes, but some of them will be persistent enough to catch you. Because if they want you, they will get you. My biggest tip is avoid getting hit by all means, as one hit will typically insta-cripple you. However, if you don't want to fight, you can usually just avoid all your problems, as you can find all your food in the ocean in abundance. So yeah. Drinking, however, is a point that will get you killed a lot if you're not vigilant. Also, if you're not good yet, don't fight tropes. It's not worth. I feel the only thing keeping Pteranodon out of S tier is that you're dead if you make a mistake in a fight. If you hit the ground, it's curtains. Desync, curtains. Invisible tree that you can't see, curtains. Laggy person, curtains. So with that, I will be placing Pteranodon in A tier. Tropiognathus. is the other playable flyer. It's got mediocre bite damage, but a special ability known as Wing Beat. This attack is notorious for giant trope using their hollow bones and fleshy wing webbing to insta-cripple Megars and Packies. For some reason, Tropy Ignathus is good at hunting these two land dinos at bigger sizes, even being able to hunt size and koas because of the self-knockback that Wing Beat does paired with its insane hitbox at bigger size. Trope also has a talent called Strong Bond, which is nearly, but that allows a boost in HP and AP, and Stam, when grouped with people you have in-game friendship with, the higher the friendship value, the higher the boost. This can get to pretty absurd levels in higher friendship groups, allowing tropes to just about forget about flying and destroy anything on the ground on the floor. However, it is a late survival talent, so you typically won't get it maxed for a while. So I'm not really taking it into effect in my ranking too much. I just kind of wanted to lay it down. Because most people play combat speed, so it's kind of really out of the way, 12 points into survival. But with that being said, Trope's biggest problem is probably PT. Assuming the PT wants to fight you at least, it's able to follow you in the air pretty well. If you just want to avoid fighting PT though, the move is to just land in a safe spot, as you can take them out of the air with a Wing Beat or a bite, and then kill them on the ground if they don't just die to fall damage after being hit by your sturdy break. And you can still die to them on the ground, but it's way less likely. Also, the PT could also accidentally cripple itself on the ground when it's trying to kill you, so yeah. But yeah, I'd say Trope also deserves a solid A tier. I say it's interchangeable with PT. Yeah, they're both. I find them both very good at just being themselves. I'm gonna group the next two together because they're very similar and play about the same. I will outline their differences though. These two being Ichthyovenator and Luridosaurus. Ichthyovenator has a stronger base damage while Lurd has higher injury and health, about 350 more HP at 1.2. The main difference between these two is that Lurd excels better on land than Ichthy because it boasts a charge attack that does pretty good damage, injury, and knockback. It can also be instantly followed up by a thumb static, adding about 150 damage. Ichthyovenator is more water-based, getting a boost in damage while submerged from an ability called Stormlord. This makes his dart very strong. Stormlord also carries onto land for a few seconds upon exiting water, and will be a constant boost on land during storms. On land, it gives them a speed boost. But that's about where the differences end, outside of their diets, of course. Luridosaurus is a herbivore, Ichthya is a carnivore. Piscivore, if you want to be that guy. Yeah, shut up. But their matchup against all ocean creatures are just about the same, which, in the ocean, they fare pretty well. They can solo Mosas, given they know how to strafe. Elasmos will typically lose to them, but can still win, of course. Against Chronos, the winner is usually decided by the initiator, but the Chrono would win more than lose, I'd say, in a 1v1, just because of the injury damage if the Ichthy or Lurd messes up. And Archelon will typically lose in a 1v1. Full Aquatic Paleo would typically win, but that's why we have land, am I right, folks? Now, against each other, it's pretty 50-50 in the water, but on land, Lurd would typically win because of the charge and the higher HP. They don't fight too well against land creatures, but winning against land creatures is still possible, like Weehan and Megaraptor, but there's really no point to be fighting Para or Acros, really, just go in the water. And they have pretty good combat and survivability, so just by staying in the ocean. And they usually have a lot of people playing both, so you can usually find groups. They've got great survivability and just they're overall fun and good playables. Since we're talking about aquatics, we might as well get the elephant in the room out of the way, Mosasaurus. Mosasaurus is an aquatic that does pretty standard damage and pretty solid bite. It also has a grab that allows you to take enemies to the pits of hell, drowning them with the insane ego boost you're about to get after killing them. However, it's got extremely good AP, and that makes it, especially on O2 and survival community servers when they come up, by far the sweatiest playable in the game. Console server, we've got max start and max persistence. With this, it only takes 10 AP to dart out of 156, assuming you don't recover any. It's at least 15 darts, and it does with no brawler, 170, which is pretty strong. And its bite only costs 6.5 ability. Also, just do this. If I didn't highlight it clearly, look at how many freaking Mosasaurus compilations there are. Oh my god. This isn't even scratching the surface, guys. There's just... Hey, look, there's me. There's just so many. So freaking many. Oh my god, it just keeps going. Going. What the fuck? And going. And going. And going. And going. And going. And going. Even way back in relatively old Bob. It's just... Mosasaurus. It's just super sweat. Holy crap. It's also the most likely for users to, hackers to use, whether that be AP hacks or ESP hacking. It is insane how sweaty an aquatic lizard could be in a dinosaur survival game. It is worse than Utah and Sniperexes from Legacy Isles, for those who don't play Bob. The dart strafe mechanic and how Moses' dart works allows Moses to weave in and out of anyone who decides to fool around in the ocean. Also, just basic strafe tail riding is quite easy on this dino. Most Mosa players don't even use the intended playstyle of Mosa dragging them to hell, which I think is way more fun than Sweatmax darting, but would rather just kill everything in the ocean with darting, which, if you look at the loading screens, you'll see that Chronosaurus is the ocean's hunter of hunters, not Mosasaurus, but that's just me. But with that being said, Mosasaurus itself is pretty solid. It can be easily killed by semis or chronos if you're not careful, but you can also kill them quite easily if you do know how to use Mosa. Maybe not as much chronos, but definitely the semis. It is by far the biggest threat to Mosas is well, other Mosas. Skilled Mosa players need to maintain their ego by killing every Mosa player they come across, and will most likely destroy you if you don't play a lot of aquatic. With that being said, Mosa can be very strong in the right hands, but it does require a different kind of masochistic mentality to have those right hands. So with that, against my goodwill, Mosa gets A tier. We're going back to land now with Cychania. Cychania is the other, being a Pado, slow tank of Beast of Bermuda. It is slow, does a ton of injury, has a turret in place, and a reflectability. The reflectability causes anyone who attacks you while the ability is active to take recoil damage to varying degrees, depending on how many points you put into Spiky Shield. While you also receive a speed buff that stacks when something attacks you when your Spiky Shield is active. This is perfect for a slow lumbering beast build, as you will get punished for attacking it if its recoil is up, and of course your attacks are your tail attacks, which makes it awkward for most things to attack you, so most things will just avoid doing so. Sai is basically a tank with the ability to punish anybody who haphazardly tries to kill you. With that being said, there are a few things that hold Sai back from being perfect. Sai has a pretty bad heal, and will typically be going up against Acros and Karks, which both do bleed, and have good heal. So you need to try to end fights fast. However, if you aren't cautious, and try to move too fast, you can be easily exploited to be attacked. The main way Cychania is attacked, actually, is its tail. Many players will just sit at the tail and attack where their head is in range of your hitbox, but your tail hitbox is out of theirs, allowing them to cheese fights. Also, Acros can usually just trade a hit or two and come back. So that happens quite often for worse players. But, Sai can usually deal with any of these threats by good timing with Reflect in order to catch your opponents. Also, Aqua is great for Sai. I feel like, and for these reasons, I feel like Sai has to be A tier because the only real weakness is Acro and Kark. But you still have a good chance of winning those confrontations, even if you're outnumbered. I think Sai is a great solo playable for that reason. It's just slow. So, yeah. So that's why I think Cychania is A tier. Our next playable is also a herbivore, being Parasaurolophus. In my opinion, Parasaurolophus is one of the best mid-tiers in the game, if not the best mid-tier in the game, that isn't completely broken. It has a headbutt that does pretty mediocre damage, that does around 150. But when you're going to be typically fighting dinos that have 600 to 900 HP, that's completely fine, as it has a stomp that basically calls curtains for any mid-tiers it hits. It also has a kick attack, which I'm going to be real, it's nothing much. It just does knockback damage. It doesn't do any damage, if people even use it. And an alarm call that highlights the targeted players to your entire group. The highlight can pass through walls and stuff, so it's pretty good for staying alive, so you can just avoid threats and keep track of them. Another thing is that Para is very fast, being only outsprinted by an ambushing Rex, charging Packy, or very slightly by Megaraptor. Megars would be a huge problem, but one tail hit will usually be enough injury for the Para to catch the Megar, assuming you have 3 Bruiser. And if you don't want to fight the other things, well, ambushing Rex and charging Packy is situational. Usually you can just stomp a Packy and it's dead, but you can usually catch an ambushing Rex before it gets you. So yeah, but that's just Rex's playstyle. But if you don't want to fight, you don't have to. As I said earlier, you can outrun all your threats. You are faster than Weehan and Megalo, which I sweat. Oh my god, I said Weehan and Megalo. You're faster than Weehan, you can survive Megaraptor. And all the other mid-tiers they're just obsolete to you. You can just kill Paleo. If you're good enough, you can solo full groups of Megaraptors or Megalos. And usually you don't need to solo them, because Para is probably the most popular herbivore with the ability to group with Oppas and Brontos. People really sleep on the combat prowess of Para though. I'm not saying it can face tank Rexes and Acros, but it can put a stop to any non-Apex very quickly. Literally. Para's Stomp has about the same speed as a Bite, and pretty good mobility when you use it, assuming you have Terminal Stomping. Para is deserving of A tier. It's just a solid herbivore. I think it's definitely the dino you should play if you're just getting into the game, because as I said, it probably has the best survivability. I'd put Para number 1 for new player. The last member of A tier is Acrocanthosaurus. Acro does a lot of bleed. It's got pretty strong bite damage, amazing heal, and a damage reduction call that makes the victim of the call turn pink, reducing their damage up to 42% with 5 out of 5 Intim Roar. And I think it's probably the highest skill requiring carnivore in the game right now. Acro is currently kind of squishy, being able to be 3-shot by Rex, Kark, and Koa. But it's also quick and nimble, being able to tail ride other Apexes that don't have tail attacks. And, well, you can even tail ride Sai if you want to be that guy. But, and it can escape them in a chase, the other Apexes. Its heal and bleed heal allows Acro to tackle dinos way above its weight class, by being able to get in, get hits, get in, get hits, get hit, and go heal. So basically, go in, do damage, take damage, heal, come back, and repeat that cycle. Because Acro can recover quite quickly from an attack, but the enemy has to heal, bleed, and health. And it is nearly impossible to out-heal an Acro in these situations, and that usually gives Acro the win. However, an unskilled player can be easily killed because of Acro's relatively low HP, and the fact that most Apexes do solid injury. I don't find Acro having a huge problem against mid-tiers. Its turn is pretty good. Damage reduction, making them do way less damage. Acro has great heal, and this helps because typically mid-tiers wait between getting in and out of fights. Getting in and out of tail riding to wait for the best opening as to not get hit. And bleed plus exhausting bite makes mid-tiers have to heal longer without after getting hit, or just all of their stam and dying. With that all being said, I think Acro is the last member of A tier. Brontosaurus is undeniably the best herbivore in the game. It is so versatile, allowing it to do literally anything. I've seen all of the builds work with this thing. Speed combat works, combat survival works. Hell, I've seen speed survival work. Its kit contains great endurance, so it's surprisingly fast. Not like speedy, but faster than you might expect for a large, multi-ton herbivore. A tail whip that can pump out some pretty solid DPS, and a kick that does pretty good injury, both of them doing a little bit of stun lock. And a neck swing that is extremely strong for dealing around 400 to 500 damage. All of this combined makes Bronto the ultimate specimen. I also forgot to mention that it has a backup which allows it to just walk backwards, which is a lot better than it sounds, because it is so good for defending spots or maneuvering yourself in a combat situation. It's just wonderful. But just keep note of which one you have toggled, or you might end up with something like this. You have all of your body covered with the ability to punish anybody who doesn't plan their attacks. Even as a solo, you can deal with just about any threat that might try to attack you, even solo against groups. The biggest fear to a good Bronto player is purely food. You are great at crowd control and have the ability to keep anybody away from you. This is also boosted by the ability to be in groups with Para, the best mid-tier punisher, and could definitely finish off Apexes as you get low. I find Brontosaurus the best thing in the game with the reason to be so. Bronto gets the first spot in S tier, the best Apex, and should be the best playable in the game. These next two dinosaurs are stupidly overpowered, and should really not be where they are. This game isn't the most realistic and goes by the idea that everything can fight everything, which I appreciate, because that's fun, but Megaraptor and Paleophis are way too good for their own good. So, I'm gonna tackle Megaraptor first. Megaraptor is probably the easiest dinosaur in the game. Looking at Megaraptor's stats, it really doesn't seem like anything special. It's got relatively low HP, just enough HP to survive a heavy hit from an Apex. And its bite damage isn't too great. It has a claw attack that does a low amount of damage and pretty decent bleed. And it can land about 3 to 4 swipes every second, but you can't use it in the air and it slows you down when you use it. But there is one thing I haven't mentioned. It's the fastest base speed. It's got an insane jump and an evasive maneuver that allows it to back jump and take 0 damage while doing so. I'd say it takes about the same amount of skill that Utah does in Legacy Isle. None. The ability to follow someone's tail while praying to the decent gods not to get hit is basically the amount of skill you require. However, Legacy Utah gets one-shotted by Apex and doesn't have a get out of jail free card. Megars can usually just get out of any sticky situation after being hit by an Apex. The only real time it can't is against a Rex that got a body shot and still has some stam left. But Megar can literally solo any dinosaur in the game if the player has any experience with basic game mechanics. I will give you the 2 generic strats that every Megaraptor player uses, because here, I have some lore to unveil soon. So you know how to deal with it, if you even can. Anyways, the jump. They will jump onto you, bite a couple times, and evasive away. Pretty easy to do, pretty hard to prevent, pretty much securing at least 200 damage. You jump on something, you bite, you get away. The other mid-tiers do this, but they can't jump backwards to get away. They have to actually plan a way to get out. And anyways, the other way is just being, oh, I'm going to jump and tail ride you while you literally cannot hit me, and I can just evasive away anyway. Also, because of its speed, it can pick literally all of its fights and survive mostly on AI up until like 2.0. The only time I die on Megaraptor is when I do something admittedly very stupid. Because most of the time I can just get away if I do something stupid, or if I die to desync. Oh yeah, did I mention its aquatic speed? If it already didn't have enough escape options, it swims faster than some aquatics based swim. Also, just to restate, it does bleed, so there's that too. Hate me now, Megaraptor mains. I was one of you. And I hate to break it to you, escaping death with damage-resistant back jumps is not skill. But Megaraptor is S tier. Anyway, on to the final. Paleophis. Basically God. But before I break down each specialization of this insane creature, I'm gonna talk about Venom and something every species of Paleophis has. A little bit, just to give some background. Venom is the newest status infliction in the game, since Bleed in late 2018. It's been a while. Basically, Venom impacts your ability to recover stam and injury. The more Venom you have, the more it impacts you. Eventually, it will start to drain AP and stam as soon as you get to bigger numbers. And when every dinosaur has about 10 to 15 attacks in their AP pool, not being able to recover or even start draining it is not good. I would like to mention about Venom healing. It heals like injury, so the more you have, the more you heal. And it's affected by clotting, not healing, I'm pretty sure. This is especially bad for dinos like Sai, Koa, and Para, which use lots of AP in their attacks. Appa and Bronto, they're not as affected as bad because genuinely clotting is in their build. And you just heal it quite quickly and you don't take as much venom as other things. But they also drain stam, which I mentioned, which I personally think venom should just drain this. And it basically just keeps things being able to escape you or recover stam. So it's basically terrible for anything that can't take hits, because you can't really trade with paleo unless you're big, Weehan size at least. Also, you can track how much venom is on something with 1 point, even in inherent into snake senses. Anyways, a couple last things. Every time a paleo lands an attack, it gets a speed boost that stacks up to 7 times without points invested, and 10 times with 3 out of 3 points, so keep that in mind. Also, paleo has an ability to get rid of all bleed in a couple of seconds by sleeping and shedding. Paleophis has 3 subspecies, an aquatic, a terrestrial, and a semi-aquatic. I will be addressing them in that order, so let's get started with the sea snake. You thought Moza players were scary. Well, what if that Moza had a slender little hitbox, the ability to go invisible, take 0 injury, and have venom? You can see how that would go. Aquatic Paleo's dart isn't as great as most other full aquatics, and semis can escape to land, but everything else in the ocean is just cooked. Let's break it down. Moza probably has the best chance of survival given its attacks don't really cost that much AP, and if it really needed to, it could probably escape just darting away, or it might be able to 1v1 it and kill it, which is still possible. But if the snake gets any solid venom on it, the Moza is quickly having its survival chances lowered. Elasmo, on the other hand, is just done for. It doesn't have a lot of HP, its darts are expensive, and it usually ends with the paleo winning, just because the Elasmo can't really put up enough solid damage to fight. It takes more venom because it's smaller than aquatic paleo, and its darts are expensive. The next thing is Chrono. Chrono's thing is injury and lunge. Something paleo can't take is injury, and something that costs a lot of AP is lunge. Something that also stops when you're hit is lunge. If the paleo can just simply dart its tail back, it will win. Its tail or back, it will win. Paleo's heal is pretty good, and injury isn't a risk, so you can just dart through, get venom. Its heal is pretty good if you really want to pull the heal strat of catching heal ticks. But Paleo can deal with Chronos quite effectively. And finally, Archelon. It's just about the same chances at Chrono, but it has the potential to use even more AP with Reflect with no real way to catch the Paleo after a full hit. Because Paleo takes no injury, so honestly the move is just a beach. Any terrestrial dinosaur is also cooked, but that's the case for most aquatic versus terrestrial in the aquatic realm, so yeah. Terrestrial snake is next. It has a coil that allows it to take less damage, do more damage, and spit. The spit has the same blinding properties as Orictodromeus, which kinda makes Ori less interesting. The snake is able to out DPS and kill Wheeze and Megars and Packies when coiled, and being able to spit on them. Something I didn't mention was spit doing pretty good venom damage. So imagine 2 snakes taking on a Sai or Koa. It's a spitting session until the Koa or Sai has drained all of its AP, so they can't do anything, and they just kind of have to take it. This wouldn't be big as a problem if the victim could do literally anything, but 90 or more percent of the time you can't catch the snake or avoid its spit because of its range. It is insane. And don't forget the shedding mechanic goes for all of the snakes, so you can just get rid of all bleed instantly, and its heal is pretty good. I'm gonna be quick with the last one, Semi. It's the worst of the 3 in just damage and ability, but it can coil, spit, and dart. The coil doesn't take reduced damage and has no talent tree to increase spit range, and the dart is weak. With that being said, it's still really good. There is no escape from you now, given you can swim, If that was the strat for you previously against terrestrials, it is a bad idea now. There isn't too much to add. It's got toned down stats of the other two abilities with the abilities of both, except elusive. If you haven't guessed it yet, Playables is the top of S tier, the best playable in the game. Lovely. Now, of course, this is just my list, and my experiences and how I've played this game has brought me to these conclusions. I think everybody has different first impressions with the playables, which really sticks to you, and further judgments are usually tagged onto it. This also adds varying biases against different dinos that could make it slightly better or worse in every other person's thoughts. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed. This is my tier list. Yep, fun. Yippee, yippee, yippee.